and welcome to today's webinar. Take APM to the next level, collecting data to improve user experience. Brought to you by Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. I'll be your moderator today. My name is Matt Anger, and I'm a Senior Solution Architect with Results Positive. Results Positive is an HPE Platinum partner. We specialize in the integration of HPE tools, including AppPulse and Agile Manager. You can reach us at www.resultspositive.com. Today's speakers. We have a number of distinguished speakers that will be joining us today. First and foremost, Eric Odell. He's a Senior Product Marketing Manager for Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. We also have Ameren on the line. Three key individuals that will be joining us today and helping drive a discussion are Len Toko. He's an ITSM Analysis and Performance Lead. We also have Michael Logston. He's also a Process Manager with Ameren. And of course, Joe Rolfes will be joining us. He's an Infrastructure Specialist from Ameren. Just a few housekeeping items before we turn it over. This is a live session, so everything that we say and do here is being recorded. All recordings are available to all Vivid members after the discussions today. There is a Q&A session that's scheduled towards the end of this webinar, so feel free to type in your questions in the questions pane, and we'll go ahead and present those questions at the end and answer them for you. So another key point here is the webinar control panel. As you can see to the right hand of your screen, you have the ability to toggle your view between full screen and window mode. You can also ask questions in this particular panel on the right hand side. So let's go ahead. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Eric Odell. Eric?
Thank you very much, Matt, and hello. Welcome everyone to this webcast, Take APM to the Next Level. This is a case study on how Ameren Corporation collects data for actionable insights that improve the digital user experience. Now, we've lived in the golden age of application performance management, but we've operated in data silos. IT ops teams focus on performance and availability of services in the back end, while developers focus on tracing and troubleshooting of poor transactions. And meanwhile, the marketing team monitors user adoption and flows, business data, and customer sentiment. But no one is managing the bigger picture. Now, it's not enough to simply know if the app is performing slowly or if the server is down. Today's digital business requires that IT ops and applications teams go beyond monitoring infrastructure like service level agreements to including a basic understanding of technology's impact on the end user experience. Traditional APM tools must evolve even further to link application performance with KPIs that matter to the business. Managing today's digital user experience demands closer alignment with the business requirements and ever-changing customer expectations. So during this webinar, we're going to learn how HPE AppPulse helped St. Louis-based Ameren Corporation to link app performance directly to the customer experience, make performance action optimized, generating actionable insights that inform decisions, and also that help them to dissolve cross-team barriers and improve their DevOps collaboration. So let's start first by taking a look at how applications are accelerating the idea economy. Now, it all begins with the application and the data. Applications and data have transformed our society and our day-to-day lives, and they are everywhere and we use them constantly, whether it's paying bills and tracking our finances online, making purchases, managing home networks, or monitoring activity for security purposes, or communicating with family and friends, and of course, making us more efficient and productive at our jobs. But app teams are missing the right tools for the win. Recent surveys have found that over half of application teams lack the APM tools featuring user experience dashboards. 67% have no insight into the line of code that caused an error, slow performance, or a crash, and almost 2/3 of developers are blind to the end-to-end process of monitoring the digital user experience. These applications are running on more types of devices. They're generating and consuming more types of data than ever before. They're a reflection of the user's appetite for more and more, faster and faster. Simply put, today's applications are the catalyst that's propelling us forward, all of the innovation and new ideas and new services and new capabilities that we refer to as the idea economy. They empower consumers to do what they want to do, to get what they need and want, and act on their own ideas faster and faster. Today, the reality is that every IT department has to deal not only with how to support the new style of applications for the idea economy, but also the demands of current applications and workloads. You have to overcome complexity, speed up process, and accelerate innovation. And that's all easier said than done. So let me ask you all this. Are you pursuing a proactive approach? Few application teams admit they are. Only 26% of the application teams surveyed will actively examine user experience metrics in production. So the complexity is overwhelming, and surprisingly, many processes like monitoring from the client to the server are not automated. An interesting trend is how application teams seem to lack curiosity altogether. Our survey on APM and the digital user experience found that 72% of application teams first learn about user experience issues through user complaints. And the same survey found that only 9% of application teams give the user experience of their applications a superior rating, while nearly 40% give the user experience of their app a fair to poor rating. As mentioned earlier, when it comes to adequately utilizing application performance monitoring, no one is seeing the big picture. Forrester highlights 3 practices that cause APM to consistently fail to support business needs. The first practice that causes APM to fall short is that IT ops, application teams, and marketing are operating in data silos. Performance is only one variable impacting the experience and behavior of customers using your site or applications. Other factors, such as delivering the right content, delivering the right offer, or presenting a call to action, also impact the customer experience. Yet performance metrics are kept separately from these other factors. And as a result, the business is blind to the impact of performance on KPIs such as click-throughs, revenue generation, and lifetime value. Next, there is no understanding of the impact of performance on business. So businesses are building applications to generate business value, to engage customers with content, to make a sale, and so on. They don't build these applications to deliver performance. Performance does impact these objectives, but quantifying the exact impact on the business is not an APM priority. Organizations have to get to a place where they consider performance metrics data for analysis alongside other digital data, such as visitor path and conversion data. And finally, there is a failure to align performance resources with business needs. Modern digital application architectures are a complex mix of technologies that support many customer roles and use cases. Focusing resources on the right projects depends on knowing what customers want and need from each step in the application and website. For instance, customer sensitivity to a page's response time differs based on how far they have moved through a transaction. Yet, IT ops professionals tend to treat all parts of the application equally and fail to focus issue resolution and performance improvement efforts where they're needed the most. Now, we spoke earlier about the golden age of application performance management. So between 2000 and 2006, we saw the first generation of APM, and it was all about monitoring and managing things like user SLAs or monitoring third-party technologies such as CDNs, marketing and media advertising. Or it might have been about event correlation and firms trying to correlate events to user services to reduce volume and improve prioritization. And then from 2006 to 2014, we witnessed the second generation of APM, and this was all about developers and operations cooperation. Dev goes agile while ops needs faster repairs. Now, firms were trying to manage performance of mixed on-premises and third-party components, and of course, there were big advances in customer experience monitoring and big data analytics. So from 2015 onwards, we see new trends that are occurring, including first, monitoring the customer experience by combining app performance plus business factors analyzed together. And secondly, mobility is still accelerating and complexity is increasing with big data, microservices, and the Internet of Things as all of these things are taking over. So now firms want predictive analytics that bind performance and business data to produce actionable insights for business decisions. And they want to fine-tune performance for precise customer segmentation. Now, to succeed in this, Forrester recommends that businesses must first align performance management efforts with business needs and outcomes. For instance, a bank might monitor deposits in real time just to see the business impact of performance issues on deposits. And if deposits are declining while there are performance issues, then prioritization goes to the improvement of the digital user experience. If deposits decline where there are no performance issues, however, then it might be something like a competitive issue. Second, taking APM to the next level means to achieve you have to achieve customer-obsessed performance management. In other words, businesses must examine application performance issues as it relates to the customer or user journey. So did the abandonment occur because of slow pages earlier in the transaction funnel or because of slow pages later in the process? So by examining user behaviors and abandonment rates at different stages of the journey, IT ops and applications teams can prioritize efforts on what matters to the business. And what about being action optimized? Businesses need to deliver the right performance to the right audiences. And it's important to measure user behavior and geographic location, as well as factors like device type, operating system, and browser version. All of these impact the customer's performance expectations and experience. With the right APM tools, businesses could examine customer segments and optimize performance for each customer. And finally, Forrester also mentions that it's really time to dissolve cross-team barriers and improve cooperation among siloed teams. So let's take a look at what you should look for in an APM. And this is sort of an end-to-end monitoring guide. First, you need to understand your customers, and this involves formalizing a process for creating the journey maps or user flows. And you need hard data about the different personas who will be using your app and a complete picture of how they'll be using the app. And this data should be constantly revalidated as usage patterns change often. Now, using these journey maps, you can create scripts for synthetic monitoring that simulate user behavior so that when an issue or degradation is found, development teams can quickly resolve the issues before end users discover it. So in Understand Your Users, you may need to know, collect data about version adoption, geolocation, common user flows, operating systems and devices, what kind of connection type that they're on. Secondly, you need to understand the user experience and measure what matters. So when you truly understand your users and what's important to them, you'll know exactly which variables of the application user experience to measure. You must measure what matters for the user's perspective, like performance, stability, errors, battery usage, network consumption, and many other items. Third, you need to monitor the user experience. And what's needed is a life cycle approach to monitoring UX, including a process for resolving issues that are identified. And that means monitoring should be continuous and proactive for all key user interactions, devices, etc., and should trigger alerts to DevOps teams when problems occur. Ultimately, DevOps should implement a single measurement that encapsulates the overall user experience so that it can be tracked over time and issues can be addressed continuously. Finally, we need to monitor transactions end to end. And DevOps should be able to trace transactions end to end, and this requires instrumenting apps and app servers so that DevOps can collect the data needed to establish benchmarks and observe and address the issues over time. So we want to introduce you to a smarter APM solution with HPE AppPulse. It's a smarter solution in that it helps your firm to dissolve team barriers and to work together more efficiently to improve the user experience. So within any organization, we see IT ops wanting to ensure the app's availability and performance, and they need proactive synthetic monitoring that emulates user actions and devices and upholds SLAs. And we see the line of business who wants to achieve a 5-star rated app to boost adoption and revenues. And they need to measure everything impacting the user experience with user experience monitoring. And then there's the app team who want visibility into app issues from the user action all the way down to the line of code with transaction analytics. The HPE AppPulse suite includes 3 modules. First, there's HPE AppPulse Active. Now, this is synthetic monitoring that emulates application and end users and devices. It detects performance and stability issues for web, mobile, and SaaS applications, and IT ops can see and fix issues before users are even aware of them. And then we monitor the user experience with HPE AppPulse Mobile. Now, this is real user monitoring that measures the user experience from the user's perspective, so application teams can understand the business impact. And it provides a single user experience quality score called the Fundex from 0 to 100 that encapsulates the overall experience. And it also follows user interactions with your mobile app screen by screen, showing where users entered and exited the app and everything that happened to them along the way. And finally, we trace the user experience from the front end to the back end with HPE AppPulse Trace. Now, this is transaction analytics that allows DevOps teams to drill down into web and mobile user transactions to isolate problems and diagnose issues down to the line of code to the transaction-specific log level. So these 3 integrated solutions deliver one fantastic user experience. So IT faces a choice. It can empower the business to move faster, or IT can lose relevance. IT can become something that adds more business value or something its constituents circumvent at every opportunity. And that's not a real choice, and I think everyone listening today would agree upon that point. So the question becomes how? How will IT overcome the obstacles to moving faster and transforming toward the new digital enterprise? And this is about, first off, realizing efficiency, driving agility, and accelerating innovation. So rather than me going forward and giving you a demo, I've invited some special guests to tell you in their own words just how they are transforming their organization to a digital enterprise. And I'm going to turn it over right now to our moderator, Matt, who is going to introduce the team from an energy and utilities company called Ameren Corporation. Matt?
Hey, thanks, Eric. That was a great introduction. I appreciate that. In fact, I just learned a lot more about APM than I have known before. So on the call we have Ameren. It's a real life case study. So on the call, you're in for a treat because we're going to take you down through a few slides. We're going to speak to some experts that have joined us from Ameren, including Len Toko, Michael Logston, and Joel Rolfus. But before we do that, let's go ahead and flip to the next slide. And let's turn it over to Michael. Michael, can you tell us a little bit about Ameren?
Sure, Matt. Be glad to. Ameren's a utility based out of St. Louis, as it says. We're a combination of regulated utilities, both from Illinois and Missouri. As you can see, we were formed in '98, although the original companies have all been around for 100 years. We have 8,500 employees. We cover most of the state of Illinois. We cover quite a bit of Missouri. We have approximately 2.4 million electric customers and around 1 million gas customers.
Wow, that's impressive. Well, can you tell me a little bit more about how Ameren is transforming itself into a digital enterprise? What steps are you taking internally?
Well, if you kind of understand how utilities have been over the years, we kind of started as a, where the face of the business was out in all the small towns we might have served, but then we brought things in-house to to contact centers where people would call in. But now I think you're finding that people want to be able to go find information and make transactions online. So we've been working the last few years on improving our digital presence. We started our Ameren.com web page, which allows a user to go in, or a customer to go in and pay their bill, to do a move in, move out, to understand their energy usage, and of course to report an outage or to see outages, which I think are all very important, especially during storm season.
Sure, sure. And this last question I want to ask you just popped in my mind, and it might be an obvious answer, so I apologize for that, but why do you think it's so important for energy and utility companies like Ameren to be on the forefront of this transformation into a digital enterprise?
Well, I think it's important because, as a utility, we're having to transform ourselves, right? In the past, utilities were highly regulated, still in many ways still are, but they're having to change because of competition, whether it's from battery storage or renewable energies. We're having to look for different ways to be able to, quite frankly, survive. And one of those ways is to provide a better customer experience and to provide a more cost-effective customer experience.
Great, great. No, that makes sense. I've heard that from other organizations as well. So it seems everybody is really pushing hard to make the transformation. So let's talk a little bit about the implementation here. Ameren, of course, has adopted one of HPE's tools to move ahead. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and give us a quick review of your implementation, and then I'd like to ask a few questions.
Sure. So this is Len. The overall implementation, we're using a trio of HP products of ArcSight, OMI, and AppPulse. And the implementation happened sometime late last year. It was a very smooth implementation, and what we did there was we sat down with our business users and we, at a high level, said what are the most important transactions that occur in our digital channels. So they identified those, and we went ahead and worked to get those specific transactions monitored by AppPulse. So that's
Sure.
the majority of that AppPulse implementation.
So as far as the online channels were concerned, you mentioned you worked with your business to identify the most important ones. But could you speak a little bit to the audience about some of the issues or problematic areas that you were having prior to AppPulse, or maybe some of the lack of visibility?
Absolutely, and you really just hit the nail on the head. It's the lack of visibility that's what was driving us. So we have our customer contact centers, as we call them, and that's where customers will call in and perform the same transactions that they can perform online. I want to move in, move out, end my service, start service, whatever they may need to do. And we would get calls into that same center saying, hey, I went online and I tried to do this transaction online, but I couldn't do it, so I had to call you. Right, that was your main business driver, is the fact that our customers were telling us when pieces of our website were down.
Gotcha. And that's obviously never a good thing. You never want to really hear it from your customers. So let me ask you a few other questions here that just popped in my mind. Have you measured the impact that a poor customer experience or a poor digital user experience has on either the brand of Ameren, or perhaps any other sort of impact that it has? And what are you seeing with that?
So I don't know if I have an exact measurement of that, but the company is extremely concerned with our user experience. Given the fact that we are a utility, our customers are with us. There's clearly not a lot of choices, right? In Missouri we are regulated. In Illinois there are some other choices, but we do want to make sure that our customer experience is extremely high, because the Ameren's very concerned about our customers, what's going on out in the community. And we don't want to be that giant uncaring utility. That's not who we are. That's why we're investing in this space.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And we often get a lot of questions about certain key performance indicators or metrics that an organization might find useful to measure. As an example, I've often heard that an end user makes their impression or decision about a SaaS application, as an example, or a web-based application within the first 3 to 5 seconds, based on the UI, based on its ease of use, things of that nature. What are some different categories? Do you have any categories that Ameren measures it based on, like key performance indicators around, length of time on the application, or do you look at ratings, reviews? What do you do?
Sure. So like I said, before we started this, we really did have a lack of visibility in this space, and since we've had AppPulse online, we've been able to provide our application teams with more data, more useful data than they've ever had before about how long it takes our logo to load, to how long it takes an online transaction to complete. So given that we're still new in this space, we don't have a lot of specific metrics. One of the things, well, two of the big things that we're looking to adopt in the future, because we're now looking in that mobile space as well, and we're proponents of that Fundex, if you will. We saw some intriguing things around that, and we're talking about adopting that as a company. And then also, I'm going to be challenging my team. This may be the first time they're hearing about it. I'm sure they'll love that. To give me metrics around the completion of the transactions, right? So now that we're able to monitor our online transactions that are important to the business, we would like to be able to start reporting out to them how long these things are taking and what our success rates are there.
Sure. No, that was great. And for the folks on the call, just as an FYI, the Fundex is actually built into the AppPulse product suite, and Eric is probably much better to speak to that than me, but there's more information out there on HPE's website regarding Fundex. So let's dive into the selection criterion. So, of course, AppPulse is not the only product on the market and for application performance monitoring. So tell us a little bit about why you chose this as your solution.
I'll take that one too. And I'll be honest with you, given that we didn't have a whole lot in this space when we first heard about this product, this was really the only one that we knew about that met our needs, to be quite honest with you. There wasn't a lot of competition in my mind in this space, and this one was so easy to use and all the things that we were looking for that it was really kind of a no-brainer for us.
Okay, fair enough. No-brainer. We always like to hear that. Before we move on to the next slide, I want to get some more insight. It's very quick and easy to stand up. We have done it internally at Results Positive, and we've integrated it with some of the other HPE tools. Tell us about your experience in standing up the product and having it start to monitor different things. I mean, how long did it take you on average?
So you're talking about hours for an implementation on something that's pretty straightforward. Our implementation, actually one of the big things that we did was we took on a really daunting task of making AppPulse work with our customer service application, and that's an 18-year-old application. It's an internal application, so we're kind of really using AppPulse. We're kind of stretching it, I guess, if you will, right? So for Ameren.com, it's almost, I don't want to say effortless, but it's pretty low drag to get that set up. But we did a lot of work getting it to monitor an internal application that we've had online for 18 years. And I am extremely pleased that we put the effort in, and the results we're getting out of that have been fantastic.
Good. And you sort of answered a few questions that I was probably going to pose on the next slide, but if we could go ahead and flip over to the next slide quickly. So, we talked about this a little bit. Why AppPulse? Of course, ease of use, the speediness around the implementation, but of course there's other factors as well. Can you speak to me a little bit about your investment into other HPE products?
So I know that we have OpsBridge, right? So one of the key things that I was interested in was making sure that the AppPulse alerts could feed into OpsBridge, because we want to have our NOC watching just one single pane of glass, if at all possible. So the fact that AppPulse is in this HPE family really worked in our favor in this case.
Yeah, we also have NNMI and a number of operations manager agents, so we can get a more holistic view of the network and some of our infrastructure and utilize that to help us drive to root cause when we do see these application performance issues.
Okay, very good. And I see mentioned in here in parentheses that you're using ViewGen, so you must be using LoadRunner and UFT for some mobile automated testing. Is that fair to
Well,
say? Or?
if Joe's on the line, now you're getting down to a level of management's
Okay.
not gonna.
Well, we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about that in a few slides ahead. So for the folks on the call, we're going to get a little bit more technical here in a few slides. So if you're a techie, we're going to dive into a few things.
I think the key here on this slide, though, was the fact that we needed both internal and external points of presence to be able to test our applications, right?
Okay.
So that was key for us. You know, we're using we're using pops out of Chicago to give us an idea of that external user presence, but it was important to put those BPM agents in around where our key call centers were so we could measure the performance on those CSS applications. And what we did there is we built purpose-built desktops that sit in communication closets on the same networks that run those CSS transactions that Joe will show you here a little later, that really gave us that true user experience.
Oh, I think you're stealing Joe's thunder here. So
no, he'll get into the details.
all right, so let's go ahead and jump into it. Hey, Joe, are you ready to speak to us a little bit about the?
Sure.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah. So some of the applications that we monitor have already been kind of talked about at a high level, and the first and probably the most difficult one is our call center application. And as Len said, this is it's an older application, so it's 18 years here at Ameren, but it's been in production at utilities across the world for about 25 plus years. I happen to be on the team that implemented it 18 years ago, so so I'm very familiar with it. And I measure it by the age of my oldest son. He was born about a month before we went live with it, so I remember it dearly. So to give you a little bit of background, we call our system CSS, Customer Service System, and it's a legacy client server application where you have a fat client sitting on a call taker's desktop, and it makes back-end calls to COBOL services that run on an HP Unix server with an Oracle database. So it's been around for a while. One of the things that we really benefited from were the different options that we had to script the transactions. So this was not an easy thing to start scripting. We went down the path in ViewGen trying to figure out exactly the communication protocol to use for scripting, and then quickly found out that unified functional testing would be much easier. So UFT is what we ended up landing on. And with the help of some of the professional services folks at HP, we were able to get a script with multiple transactions complete and up and running in a matter of it was a couple of weeks to get this one, because it was a little bit of trial and error with the different types of protocol. But it was good that we had some options. And as Mike said, that we wanted these to mimic the real user experience as much as possible. So we built some machines that they were basically just a standard desktop machine with an image that is on the desktops of our call takers. We put them in basically a network closet out at the call centers, so they're on the same network, and they run these scripts every 10 minutes and provide performance and reliability data back into AppPulse. And that's how for the first time ever that in the 18 years I've been involved with this application, we've been actually able to get real metrics on the end-to-end performance from a user perspective. So that was really it was pretty amazing. We'd always been able to measure the back end. It's easier to measure, back-end service performance than it was to measure the actual round trip and the full user experience. So yeah, it was really cool. And the picture there is actually a picture of, I just took a snapshot as the transaction was running on one of the BPMs. So it shows you multiple layers of windows.
So just to recap quickly, so what you've done is you spun up VMs or what have you in the same data center or in the same network or LAN as each of your contact centers. You installed your call center software on there. You built scripts with the help of professional services from HPE with UFT to conduct various use cases, so to speak. And these execute every 10 minutes. Is that right?
That's correct. The only thing that wasn't correct is we use an actual desktop machine, so there's no VM. We wanted it to be just like what the user's doing. But yeah, other than that, that's exactly what we're doing.
So let me ask you, prior to using AppPulse and UFT, did you do manual checks? Did you have folks in your call center actually, was that their job to in the morning take 5 minutes out of their day and manually double check and then report back to the helm, so to speak? How did that work?
Well, we had, we would actually send people out to call centers with stopwatches. It sounds really old school, and it is. But there'd be, if we would get calls about performance issues and we couldn't verify it, say, I would bring the application up on my machine and I don't see anything, there's nothing of perspective that's wrong. They would send somebody out with a stopwatch. And, I've spent a lot of time at our contact center here in St. Louis walking the floor and seeing when the performance issues hit. I don't have to do that anymore. I know before most people.
It's actually prevalent how many organizations still do time series analysis in such a manual factory type of way with stopwatches. And if you really think about it and you add up all those increments of time that's spent and you do the math based on somebody's hourly rate, whatever they're getting paid by the organization to do all this on a daily basis, compare it up against how quick and easy it is to deploy AppPulse as an example, and to create a few UFT scripts and to sort of emulate or virtualize how this would all play out. It's really amazing because the ROI is very, very quick, right?
Absolutely.
So tell me, did you run into any challenges? I don't want to paint a purely rosy picture for everybody on the call, but tell me about any challenges you might have hit along the way and how you overcame those.
Yeah, sure. Honestly, there's always technical challenges when you're rolling out new software, new functionality. They were pretty minor, and they were more along the lines of, getting, the BPM machines set up at the call centers, and, working through the firewall issues, for getting, applications flowing into our operations bridge, which I think we'll talk about that, our architecture just a little bit later on. But honestly, it was more of a mindset kind of problems that we had to deal with from our own internal teams. I think we're fairly, probably not unlike other companies, we're fairly siloed, in our work within our IT organization. And I think, as we started showing, some of the results that we've gotten through AppPulse and monitoring our transactions, monitoring our application through synthetic transactions, we've been able to provide the feedback back to the app teams. And the app teams are taking the calls when they go, when the applications go down. So I think that was probably the most difficult thing to do.
You said one word that resonated with me and kind of stuck out: mindset. And how did you shift that paradigm internally? And tell me about the as-is or the older mindset around application performance monitoring versus, what your team is seeing today. I mean, in the terms of, philosophical terms of Socrates and the allegory of the cave, once you see the light, it's a different story. How did your team open their eyes to what they can actually do now?
Well, I think that the mindset is shifting, and what we tried to do is, for one, make sure that we weren't providing false positives. That was a really big concern of ours. We wanted to make sure that, if we put an alert up that it was an actual problem that somebody had to deal with. There's nothing worse than getting called at 2 o'clock in the morning for something that something that's not really an issue. So I think providing the real data to the teams is was helping to change that mindset. So
great.
Well, there's a couple more use cases that we and one of the slides is up here for the applications that we are monitoring, and this one is kind of a fun one because it wasn't really planned from our initial roadmap. It's Skype for Business. So we had had a problem with Skype going down during the day, for no apparent reason. So the messaging and mobility team came to us and asked if we could set up a transaction to watch it. And this was hands down the easiest one that we had ever done. So their team provided us with 2 URLs, and one was for like a GoToMeeting. I think it was meet.ameren.com or something along those lines. And then the other one was similar. It was a dial-in URL. And they would both crash. And Skype for Business has become, I'm sure, like most companies, it's pretty integral to our organization. We have people in Illinois and people in Missouri. We do allow some remote working spacing, and it's almost impossible to find a conference room. So we really we're relying on Skype. So we were able to basically walk out of that meeting with a couple of URLs, go to AppPulse, and set up 2 transactions in about 10 minutes. And literally, it was just an up-down. They wanted to see if the URLs, if they were working. 10 minutes, we had data flowing in. Within a day, we had caught one of the crashes, and that alert went to our operations bridge, which our NOC is monitoring, and they were able to contact the messaging and mobility team so they could gather the logs. They bounced the services after they gathered all the information they needed and provided to Microsoft for from analysis. And ultimately, we were able to, through the help of our synthetic transactions here, they were able to find and fix the issue. Right. And so we don't have that. And
that's fantastic.
So that one was a pretty cool one.
The simplicity of it too, and working through it. Now I know you have a little bit more of complex use cases, and just for sake of time, let's talk about some of your customer-facing apps as well.
Sure. So this is Ameren.com, and then our mobile version, which Mike and Lynn talked about just a little bit. These are important because the more we can drive our customers to our websites and to our mobile app to manage their own accounts, then the less that they have to call into our contact centers, and it makes us a little bit more efficient. So, So we used.
A quick question on that.
Go ahead.
In the upper right corner, I see that looks like Firefox.
It is.
Is this you guys have a responsive design? So you have you don't have a native mobile app available in the store, do you?
No,
or is it
not yet? It's
okay.
just a wrappered website, basically. So we do have a development team that is working on a native, native apps for Android and iOS, but we're not quite there yet. They actually are very close on some internal apps that our service folks will use. And then I had a meeting last week with the mobile development team to talk about monitoring those.
Awesome.
But we haven't gotten quite that far on our customer-facing side yet.
All right. Well, let's check out the demo slides real quick if we have a chance.
Sure. Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a picture of AppPulse. And what I have circled here is actually something that happened yesterday. So this is pretty recent examples. And basically this is an overall picture of our response time and availability. The line at the bottom is response time, and the line up at the top is our availability. We want that line always at the top, to be pretty smooth at 100%. And so what happened is we caught, using AppPulse, we caught a lag in response time. And what I've got circled there is an alert that came out. So they got the little bell, and that indicates that we had an alert. And if you go to the next page, I'll show you how we do a little deeper dive into where the problem was. So AppPulse provides a lot of information that we can use to do troubleshooting. And one of those that we use quite a bit is called status over time. And what I've got circled is the period of time yesterday when our application had a performance issue. And so those red little bars with the numbers above them, those numbers are actually the time that it took to perform those transactions. And if you can read it, hopefully, you can see that those times are double, triple what they normally are when they're green. And so it just gives you a little bit more granular view on how widespread the problem was.
Gotcha.
Yeah, can you move to the next slide? I got another example of a screenshot from AppPulse. Okay, so after you kind of figured out the breadth of it, there's a couple of other tabs that we can use for troubleshooting, and one is the alerts. And that's important because those are what actually gets fed into our operations bridge, and that's monitored by the NOC. And so we can get a view of when the alerts were sent over and what transactions they were sent for. So that's kind of that top part. The bottom left actually will show you the errors. So if you're getting failures and not necessarily maybe response time issues, but if your app is failing, it'll log the failures as it's running the transaction, and you can drill down into what the message was that was received when the failure happened. And the really cool thing is it also takes a snapshot for web applications. It'll take a little snapshot of the screen that it was on for the synthetic transaction that it was running at the time. And that's what I have over to the right-hand side. It's just a snapshot taken during a failure. So anyway, so those are some of the tools that we use when we do some performance issues. And what we have now, so kind of talking about the life cycle of an event or an alert, they get generated through AppPulse, and then they flow into our operations bridge. So we use Operations Manager, and this is what's being monitored. This is kind of the main view that our NOC is monitoring. And to the left-hand side, you can see there's just some basic stoplight style displays that show you when each kind of category is the health of the category. And so we have applications. We also monitor domain controllers and Oracle through connectors to SCOM and OEM, which I'm not really talking about today, but so that's kind of the NOC picture. And over to the right is the alerts that come in, and that's what they react to. And we were able to develop runbooks that the NOC can access right in the alert. If they double click on one of those guys, one of those red lines, it'll pull up another window, and they can view some instructions on how to handle that alert. And then they can also send it to our ticketing system, and through a right click on the alert, so there's no more manual entry into our ticketing system once an event comes in. And it provides also closed loop processing, incident processing. So if an event clears on its own, it will send a resolve to the ticketing system, and vice versa. If somebody takes the incident and starts working it and resolves it through our ticketing system, it will resolve our our event over in the operations bridge. So that's kind of how the events flow from AppPulse into the ops bridge over to the ticketing system, and how our NOC is managing it. So
very cool. Very cool. So pretty much you have all of this integrated together as you see on this particular slide. Talk to us about, I think you just did, but let's go through a typical end-to-end.
Yeah, so this is kind of a ridiculously high-level architecture view, but to make it pretty straightforward, we have AppPulse, which is a SaaS solution, so it's out in the cloud, and as most companies are, we're very security conscious, so we didn't want we didn't want a direct feed into our internal systems. So what we did is stood up another machine, kind of a mid server in the DMZ, and it receives receives the alerts from AppPulse, and then the operations bridge is pulling every couple of seconds from into that mid server to pull the events off of it. So again, run the transaction on the desktop or out on one of the POPs that HPE provides us. If AppPulse finds an alerts, it sends it into this operations agent that's sitting out in the DMZ, and then the operations bridge is pulling that and bringing them into the console view that the NOC is monitoring 24/7. So there you go. And then it was just, it was a good team effort in setting this all up. We had to work with, everybody from the business to understand the transactions that they wanted to monitor, to the applications team to, help us through, how to navigate the applications in order to script them, all the way down to our server teams who helped us get all the equipment set up, our network team, which helped us get all the firewall access that we needed, and all the way down to the database folks who set up the back-end databases for us and stuff. So it was it was one of the more broader reaching projects that we've done here, so, in my opinion. I think that's all I've got.
Well, very cool. That's interesting to hear about the collaboration between your teams and how everybody sort of came together to, to successfully integrate these two products together. It seems to be that, of course, if you could give me, maybe one or two key things that, in your opinion, were the biggest results gained from moving forward with AppPulse, what do you think it would be?
Sure. I think first and foremost is just visibility into our application performance, especially on such an old application that we have. Haven't had that before. It's just so that was a big eye opener, and definitely a something valuable that we've been able to see ROI on it right away. And just really just the ease of setting up these transactions, that's been huge. We get, now that the word's getting out, we get other teams that are asking us to monitor their applications. As word's getting out that we're providing them the kind of data that they haven't seen before. So those are good things.
Yeah, and from our perspective, we're seeing that customers are sleeping a lot better at night too. It seems that everybody's sleep has improved and morale is higher and productivity is therefore better.
Absolutely.
You don't have to worry about anything, And if you do, at least you're notified prior. You still have to worry, but you're not like worrying whether there's an ambush around the corner, so to speak, because
right.
you have your drones up there looking for you. So you can march ahead with confidence knowing where the enemy is, so to speak. So Hey, this has been a fantastic conversation. We really enjoyed you guys taking the time to, join today's event and speak to us about your experience with AppPulse. I'd like to thank everybody on the call, and I also want to mention that we're going to have this transcript written out on the Vivid website, so you can always point your browser to vivid-worldwide.org. You complete a short survey and opt in for more information from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. And on behalf of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and Vivid, we thank you for joining today's call. And thank you again for your participation, everybody. We thank you.
All right, it's a pleasure. Thanks.
All right, take care.